you can follow it. Okay, so Kengo Miyazono, if you want to share your screen, we can start now.
Okay, can you see my handout? Okay, thank you. The same file is available from the chat. You can download and take a look yourself. Thank you for having me. It's really wonderful to be part of this series. So today I'm going to talk about group delusion and Folie Deux. So that's my topic today. So I want to begin with a little bit of background of this. By the way, so my microphones are not working well these days. Hopefully they are fine, but at any point I stop, I'm not audible anymore. Please let me know. I'll just try to do something, try to fix it. Anyway, so that's so I want to begin with a little bit of background of this. I have been working on delusions since my PhD thesis. So different aspects of it. But in recent years, in 5 years or so, I have been working on the intersection between social epistemology and the study of delusion, because I think that I think that there are some interesting ideas and the theories in social epistemology that we can learn and apply to the understanding of delusions. So that's what I have been doing in recent years. And then this is this paper is going to be a part of it. Oh, sorry. And then I want to begin with the social turn in epistemology. So that's the turn from traditional individualistic epistemology to social or socialized epistemology in the philosophical epistemology. So the dominant view of epistemic agent and agency in the traditional individualistic epistemology is to think of epistemic agent as a single individual who undertakes the task of seeking truth all by himself or herself without consulting others. So typically when you think of an epistemic agent as perceiving something in the environment and get some perceptual evidence and then do some inference or reasoning and then come to some conclusion or something like that. So that's the traditional individualistic conception of epistemic agent. And now what you got in the social turn is the social conception of epistemic agent, and where you look at epistemic agent as somebody who pursues the truth with the help of or in the face of others. So I got the descriptions from Goldman. So you go into the social settings, and then you discuss with others, and you get information from others, and you learn something from others, or maybe you argue with others, you disagree with others, and then that's the way in which you form beliefs and acquire knowledge. So that's the social conception of epistemic agent. And then so that turn from individualistic conception to to social conception of epistemic agency is relevant to the study of delusions. So that's the basic idea in the background. Because when I look at the literature, empirical and philosophical of delusion and delusion formation, I noticed that the dominant conception of delusional doxastic agent is the individualistic one. So the major theories of delusion formation look at an abnormal experience they have or abnormal reasoning they perform to come to some delusional conclusions. But but they don't talk, those theories do not talk so much about social settings and learning from others and communicating with others and disagreeing with others. So those social factors are not at least major factors in the traditional study of delusions. So that's the reason why I got interested in the intersection between social epistemology and the study of delusion. So basic idea is that probably we need a corresponding turn in the study of delusions from somehow individualistic conception of delusional agents to more socialized conception of delusional agents. So that's the background of this. Now, okay, so there are, according to Goldman, there are three major varieties of social epistemology. And then I think his classification is useful. The first variety of social epistemology is where you think about and you theorize about individualistic doxastic agents with social evidence. So you look at individuals, and then you think of them in the context of testimony or disagreement or some other kind of social interactions with others. So you look at individual agents in the social settings in face of social evidence, how you as an individual react to testimonial evidence you got or disagreement you have with somebody else. So that's the first variety of social epistemology. Now, the second variety of social epistemology looks rather at corrective doxastic agents. So you no longer look at individuals, but rather you look at groups as doxastic agents, and then you think about and you theorize about the epistemic performances of group epistemic agents, right? So that's the second variety. And the third variety, so I'm not going to talk about this today, so I'll be quick about this. The third variety of social epistemology is where, so that's a version of the second variety, but you look at systems and institutions as epistemic agents. So there are some differences between the second variety and the third variety. In the second variety, you look at the groups of individuals. The third variety, you look at the institutions and the systems. So there are some differences, but I'm gonna skip I'm gonna skip that. So, and then what I did before in this paper last year or 2 years ago, is to apply the second variety, the first variety of social epistemology to the study of delusions. So this is what I did in this paper. So what I did in this paper was to think about people with delusions as somebody who respond to testimonial evidence and then disagreement with others. So I proposed what I call the testimonial theory of delusion, according to which delusions in schizophrenia are partly developed due to what I call testimonial abnormalities, like there's some abnormal reactions to testimonial evidence. And then I explain how those testimonial abnormalities get into the process of delusion formation and development. So that's what I did. So that's basically an application of the first variety of social epistemology to the study of delusion. Now, what I want to do today in this talk is to apply the second variety of social epistemology to the study of delusion. So now what I'm trying to do in this paper, in this talk, is to think about the possibility of groups, not just individuals, but the groups as delusional. And then the question is whether we can make sense of that idea, and whether it is useful to think about such an idea. So those are the main questions today. And so the aim is to apply the second variety of social epistemology to the study of delusions, and exploring the idea of groups rather than individuals being delusional. So that's the idea. Now, and I think that the Folie Deux or shared psychosis is a good example, a very useful example to think about. So that's what I'll be focusing on. Okay. So there are some similar debates. I'm not going to talk about this today, but there's some related debate about whether not just individuals but relationships can be disordered. Whether we can attribute disorders not just to individuals but also relationships. So, for example, Wakefield asks whether his harmful dysfunction and analysis of disorders entail that not just individuals but also relationships can have disorders. So that there are some debates, related debates and discussions. All right, so this is the outline of my talk today. So I'm going to skip I'll skip the section 2 because I don't think I have time. But anyway, so that will be in the paper version of it. And the section 2, so that's a little bit of background in the epistemology, on group belief. But I'll skip that. And then I'll start with the section 3, which is the brief introduction of Folie Deux or shared psychosis. And then I go on to discuss the idea of shared psychosis as group delusion, delusion attributed to groups, not just to individuals. And then the crucial question is the question about whether Folie Deux understood as a group delusion, in the sense I described to you, I'm describing you, is summative or summative or non-summative. I'm going to explain what this means in a minute, but that is going to be my question in section 4. And then in section 5, if I have time, I'm not really sure I do. I'm going to revisit a puzzle about testimony and shared psychosis, which that's the puzzle that I discussed in the very end of my paper, on testimony and delusion. There was a puzzle that I'm a bit struggling with the puzzle a little bit, and then I want to, if I have time, I'm going to explain why that's a puzzle, and then I can share you my updated ideas about the puzzle. Okay, so let me start with some background or Folie Deux or shared psychosis. People tend to use those terms interchangeably, the shared psychosis and Folie Deux. There are, however, some differences between them. So for example, shared psychosis is about psychosis, and then it's shared. So Folie Deux literally means deux literally means two, but the shared psychosis doesn't have that implication. It doesn't have to be two. It can be three or four. And then also there are some differences between them. Folie Deux typically means delusions, shared delusions that are shared. Shared psychosis does not have to be delusions because it's a psychosis. So, I mean, theoretically, it can be about any psychotic symptoms. So it can be shared hallucination. Actually, there are some cases of shared psychosis involves not just delusions, but hallucinations. Still, there are some differences between them, the Folie Deux and the shared psychosis, but I just follow the tradition of using the terms interchangeably, at least in this paper. So what is Folie Deux? Oh, this is one possible. I think this is a good definition of this. So it's a psychiatric entity characterized by transference of delusional ideas and or abnormal behavior from one person to one or more others who have been in close association with the primary affected patient. So you have one primary affected patient, and the person gets delusions or maybe hallucinations, and then that psychotic symptom is transferred to somebody else. So that's the shared psychosis. Typically, the primary patient is called the primary, or I'm going to use the term primary individual, and then I'm going to call these people who receive the symptoms. I call them secondary individuals. So the primary individual and the secondary individuals. That's the terms that I'll be using. Now, notable features of Folie Deux. So if you look at the cases, the delusions in those cases are thematically very similar to traditional delusions. I mean individual delusions. The persecutory themes are dominant in individualistic delusions, and they are dominant in Folie Deux as well, for example. So the themes are very similar in individualistic delusions and Folie Deux. And then they typically occur among nuclear family members. So for example, the typical case would be that mother is the primary individual and the son is the secondary individual or something like that. These are very common. This kind of, yeah, that's very common, that primary individual and the secondary individual belong to the same nuclear family. Social isolation is a major is a major risk factor. So for example, the mother and son, so they are very close, but they together are socially isolated from other families and other people in the community. So that's the, yeah, that's typical. Not just delusion, but hallucination can be shared. For example, the mother and son have the delusion, the persecutory delusion, that the neighbors are trying to harm them. And then they don't just believe this, but they also have the hallucination about that, like a neighbors making some noise to annoy them. And then both mother and son have the hallucination about the noise, for example. So that's possible. So this is interesting. The last thing is interesting for my purpose, at least. So the separation from primary individual is often sufficient for the secondary individual to abandon the delusional idea. Often, in some cases, that's sufficient, but not always. So there are different. So if you separate the son from mother, in some cases, that's enough for the son to abandon the delusional idea and then admit that, for example, he was wrong about it. The separation is often enough for the secondary individual to abandon the delusional idea, delusional commitment, in some cases, but not in others. So there are different kinds of cases. Okay, I'll come back to this. Okay, so related thing is the, yeah. So there are different varieties of Folie Deux. So in some cases, secondary individual just passively receives the delusion from the primary individual. In other cases, the secondary individual, after some resistance, initial resistance, is persuaded by primary individual, and then after that, actively committed to the idea. In some other cases, the primary individual and secondary individual simultaneously come up with the same delusional idea. In this kind of case, the separation is not enough for the secondary individual to abandon the idea. And then in other cases, the primary individual and the secondary individual mutually influence each other, and then they can play different roles in the development of their ideas or theories. Okay, so there are different kinds of cases. Now, I'm going to skip this. So there aren't many established or sophisticated psychological theories of shared psychosis, but I think one notable exception is two-factor theory. So two-factor theory of delusion applied to the cases of Folie. So this is kind of interesting, but I can come back to this when if I, yeah, in the Q&A possibly. Yeah, maybe I can skip it because I want to now get into the main part of my talk, where so that's the main part, section 4. This is where I try to push this idea of thinking of Folie Deux as group delusion. So delusion attributed not just to individuals but groups. So that's the idea. Now I want to start. So this is the main part, and then I want to start with the example, the useful example to think about. So this is a very interesting case. Maybe I don't have enough time to read everything. So this is an interesting case I got from this paper. So this example is interesting. The primary individual of this case is Sister 1, 21st, 21 years old, and then there are two secondary individuals, Sister 2, 23, and Sister 3, 22. So, okay, Sister 1 is primary, and the Sister 2 and 3 are secondary. So that's the, and then Sister 1 originally comes up with delusional ideas. She got delusional. By the way, so they have been very close for some family reasons. They live together, and then their relationship, they're very close. They're psychologically very close. Okay. And then at some point, Sister 1, the primary individual, came up with delusional ideas, some religious delusional ideas. For example, that they are somehow special. God is taking care of them because they are special. And then at some point, Sister 1, and then also the other sisters as well, come up with, and then they come to believe, or at least on the face of it, they seem to believe that the God wants them to occupy a house in a town, and then they are convinced by this idea. So there's a kind of nice house in a town, and then they believed, they come to this delusional conviction that God wants them to take the house, basically. And then what they did was to illegally get into the house, and then threatened the occupants of the house. And then, yeah, of course, the police came, they got arrested, and then they sent to psychiatric procedures, and then, yeah, so that's what they happened. So this case is very interesting because they do not just come up with delusional ideas, delusional beliefs. It's not just that they share delusional beliefs and ideas, but that they actually act on the basis of the delusion. So they actually went to the house and tried to occupy the house, which is illegal, and then they got arrested. Okay. So so this is the case. And then, yeah, so basic idea that I'm interested in here is the no, so this is not, sorry, it's not persecutory delusion. So I think I was wrong about this, but so basic idea is that delusion, for example, in this case, can be attributed not just to individuals, sister 1, sister 2, sister 3, but also to the group, which is constituted by sister 1, sister 2, sister 3. So we can attribute this delusion, for example, delusion that God wants them to take the house, to not just to individuals, but also the group of individuals, the sisters. Now, there are two major premises or supporting this idea. One premise, which is coming from social epistemology, I'm not going to argue for this, I just take this for granted. So the idea is that we can literally, not just metaphorically, attribute beliefs, not just to individuals, but also groups. Right? So that's basically the second variety of social epistemology. So we can look at groups, not just individuals, as independent epistemic agents with beliefs, desires, aims, purposes. So that's the idea. So I'm not going to argue for this, but that's one premise that I'm relying on here. Now, the second premise is that nothing rules out the possibility that not only individuals, but also groups can have delusional beliefs in light of popular or influential definitions of delusion. So for example, if you look at DSM-5, this is the definition of delusion you get, you can find. And then on the face of it, nothing rules out the possibility in that not only individuals, but also groups can have the belief which satisfies these conditions specified here, right? Now, I think that's right. There are some problems. One problem I think is that is something like this. So DSM-5 talks about something like this. So delusion is delusion is held despite what almost everyone else believes, and despite what constitutes incontrovertible and obvious proof or evidence to the contrary. So on the face of it, DSM-5 and then other diagnostic criteria and other textbooks seem to define delusions as something idiosyncratic and personalized. So if you look at major definitions of delusions, they have this kind of commitment. Basically, delusions as something idiosyncratic and personalized, right? So these kind of conditions. Now, I think that's true, but not. It's not conclusive. But I think there are some responses, possible responses to this. So, for example, you can say that Folie Deux is idiosyncratic in the sense that the belief is not ordinarily accepted in the community. So it's not the case that in the community where the sisters live, it is not ordinarily accepted that God wants them to take the house, for example. So still that's idiosyncratic. You can also say that the delusion, the group delusion, is idiosyncratic in the sense that the belief is not shared by independent doxastic agents. So the sister 1, sister 2, sister 3, they do share the delusions, but they are not independent doxastic agents in the sense that they jointly constitute group epistemic agents. So they're not independent doxastic agents. And then it's idiosyncratic, even in the sense that belief is actually not shared by the members of G. So it is actually possible that the belief is not shared by even in the group. So so I'll get into this in a minute, but it is actually possible that it's not the case that the sister 1, sister 2, sister 3 share the delusion about God. So it's related to this idea of non-summativism. I'll get into now. Right. So so there are, now I'm getting into the discussion between summative and non-summative. So basically, there are two questions here. I think I want to focus on, maybe I don't have time to discuss both of them, but at least I can give you the sense of what these questions are. Maybe I think I will be focusing on one of them.
Yeah, you still have like 10 good minutes.
Yeah, good. Thanks. So one question is whether, assuming that the Folie Deux can be understood as group delusion in the sense I described, whether the Folie Deux is summative belief or non-summative belief. Group delusion is summative belief if all or most members of the group believe, for example, that sorry, the content is wrong. Sorry, that's a bit. So sorry, it's coming from an older version of the handout. So for example, in the example I gave you of the sisters, the group belief is summative if all the members of the group, namely sister 1, sister 2, sister 3, believe that, for example, God wants them to take the house. Okay. It is a non-summative group belief if it is not the case that all or most members of the group, sister 1, sister 2, sister 3, believe that the God wants them to take the house. Okay, for example, maybe sister 1 believes that God wants them to take the house, but maybe sister 2 and sister 3 do not really believe this. Okay, so that's the non-summative case. Here's another question, slightly different, relevant, but slightly different, whether Folie Deux is summative delusion or non-summative delusion. So a group delusion is a summative delusion if all the members of the group have, it's not persecutory, but so all the members of the group have the delusion with the same content. So sister 1, sister 2, sister 3 have delusion with the same content, namely the content that God wants them to take the house. Okay. Now, and then that is non-summative delusion if it is not the case that all members of the group, sister 1, sister 2, sister 3, have it's persecutory, delusion with the same content that the God wants them to take the house. right? So actually, there are slightly different questions. It's a bit complicated, but there are slightly different questions. So the Q1 and Q2 are slightly different questions, but here's why. A group delusion can be a summative belief, but not a summative delusion. So for example, it is possible that all sisters believe that God wants them to have the house. So it's a summative belief. All of them believe that. But it is not the case that all sisters have the delusions with the same content, because sister 2 and sister 2's belief, they believe the same thing, but they are not delusional. So they have this belief, but their beliefs are not delusions. In that case, the group delusion is a summative belief. All of them believe that, but it's not summative delusion. It's not the case that all the beliefs they have are delusions, okay? Note 2, a group delusion can be a summative delusion, but not a summative belief. So, so for example, you might think that all the sisters have the delusion with the same content. They all believe that God wants them to take the house, but it is not the case that all the sisters believe that God wanted to want them to take the house. Well, if you accept some non-doxastic view of delusions, according to which delusions do not have to be beliefs, right? Maybe some imaginings or some other mental states can be delusions, then this kind of view is possible, right? So all the sisters have the delusions, but it is not the case that all of them believe the same thing, because you can have delusions without believing them. So that's the idea. Okay. So these are it's about nitty-gritty. It's about details. But this is the whole point is to show that these are the separate questions. Theoretically, they are separate questions. Now, now I want to focus on this question, the Q1, question 1, whether group delusion is summative belief or non-summative belief. I think that's the most interesting question. So maybe I'm not going to say. I don't think I have time to talk about the question 2. So that's the question. So the question is shared psychosis or Folie Deux with summative belief. So the question is whether sister 1, sister 2, sister 3, all of them believe that God wants them to take the house, or maybe that's not. Maybe one of them believes it. Maybe sister 1 believes it, but maybe sister 2 and sister 3 don't believe it. So that's the question. So you might think that if you look at the literature and the cases of Folie Deux, it is obvious that the group delusion or Folie Deux is summative. So I think that's the assumption psychiatrists and philosophers seem to have. So it's summative. So it's obvious that all the members in the cases of Folie Deux fully believe the content. So so the summative. So basically, my sense is that the summative view is the dominant view. in the psychiatric and the philosophical literature. Now, I think that's a problematic in the sense that if you look at cases, or there are different cases, but if you look at many cases, actually the secondary individual's commitment is fragile without the presence of the primary individual. So that's the reason why in many cases the separation is sufficient as an intervention or to secondary individual, right? So when primary individual is around, the secondary individuals seem to be fully committed to the view. They agree with the primary individuals. They act together with the primary individual. But once they got separated from the primary individual, they abandon the delusional idea. That's exactly what happened in the case I gave you before. So when Sister 2 and Sister 3, so all of them got arrested in the psychiatric institution. They separated Sister 2 and Sister 3 from the Sister 1, and then that's enough. So that was sufficient for the Sister 2 and Sister 3 to abandon the delusional idea. That's exactly what happened in that case. Now, you might think that, well, then the secondary individual's commitment, they seem to have some commitment, but the commitment is actually fragile. And then maybe it's so fragile that their commitment does not count as doxastic commitment. It's not the case that they fully believe the content. They are committed, but the commitment is not a doxastic one. Because so the assumption here is that the doxastic commitment or believing requires non-fragile, stable commitment to the idea. The secondary individuals do not seem to have that kind of commitment. So probably the secondary individuals, in some cases, do not have full doxastic commitment to the idea. So that supports a non-summative view, according to which some members have full doxastic commitment, but others do not have that. Now, one interesting analogy is with those cases in social epistemology where the non-summative theorists of group belief, like Margaret Gilbert or Miranda Flicker. So those people are committed to the non-summative conception of group belief, and then the typical example they think about, they come up with, is those cases where some members of the group some members of the group, they do not have full doxastic commitment, but rather what they do is to go along with or let it stand that some particular idea. So they do not believe the idea, but they just, they can just go along with it, or they let it stand with it. So this is the one example from Flicker. So her example is the examination committee in a university. So basically, the committee figuring out whether students actually qualify for the degree. Right, so of course, that kind of examination committee, there are different people, different views, but so suppose that the committee comes to the conclusion that a particular student deserves a degree. Now, one can fully party to the commitment of the committee without full doxastic commitment to it. Maybe you don't believe actually that the student is good enough, but maybe you can just go along with the idea. You can just let it stand. You're part of the committee. You have some obligations and constraints as a committee member. But personally, you don't believe it, but the other part of you as the committee member, you just go along with it. And then that's the way in which you, as a member, contribute to the joint commitment or joint belief that the particular student deserves a degree. So the Fricker, so this is a non-summative case because you can be part of a joint commitment or joint belief without having individual belief, right?
Maybe just 1 or 2 minutes, if that's okay.
Good.
And,
okay. Good. So I think that, so I was thinking about the analogy between this kind of case in social epistemology, non-summative cases with the cases of Folie, at least some of them where, I mean, at least in some cases of Folie, it is not the case that all the members are fully doxastically committed to the view. Maybe the primary individual is fully doxastically committed, but secondary individuals might not be. And in those cases, you might see an interesting analogy with those cases with the non-summative cases of group belief in social epistemology, like the one from Fricker. So that's the idea. Now, so upshot of this is that the shared psychosis might not be a summative belief. So it is a group belief. The group has the belief that, for example, God wants them to take the house, but that's not a summative belief because it's not the case that all the members have full doxastic commitment to the idea, right? So I have a relevant discussion of summative delusion. So this is why I consider whether delusion, the group delusion can be a summative delusion or not. But I don't have time to talk about this. Happy to talk about this in Q&A. Maybe I'll skip these ones as well. So I can summarize what I got in this talk. So one major idea is that at least theoretically, there can be group delusions. So delusions that can be attributed to groups, not just to individuals. So one premise is that there can be group beliefs. So we can attribute beliefs to groups, not just to individuals. And those beliefs can satisfy the definition of delusion. For example, the definition in DSM-5, right? Now, question is whether, assuming all of this, whether the shared delusion is, the other thing is that I think the Folie Deux is a promising candidate of group delusion. And then question is whether the shared psychosis is summative belief or summative delusion. So I'm inclined to think that that's not obvious. It's like it's really case by case. Different cases have different features, but at least I'm inclined to a kind of non-summative understanding of group delusion, that at least some cases of shared psychosis or Folie Deux, the delusion, group delusion is not summative belief, and maybe it's not summative delusion either. Yeah, so that's the summary, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're now gonna have time for questions. Maybe if you'd like, you can unshare your screen, and people should have the, yeah.
All right, so we have 30 minutes for the Q&A. I would ask you to write down in the chat that you have a question, and you'll be able to ask your question to our speaker, Kengo Miyazono. Yes, so first question is from Bennett Knox.
Hello, thanks very much for the talk. Maybe this is slightly tangential to your purposes, but I'm curious if your account of group delusion would draw a principled distinction between group delusion and folie à deux on the one hand, and like things like conspiracy theories and cults on the other, because it seems like they share a lot of features, like, oh, it's this isolated group of people, their belief isn't shared by the broader culture, they hold it in spite of incontrovertible evidence. But I'm wary of like treating those types of things as psychiatric phenomena for like various reasons. So I'm curious what you think the distinction is there.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. Actually, that's another project that I'm working on right now. Trying to see the connection between them. So there are interesting connections between conspiracy theories and delusions, in particular group delusions. So, for example, there are lots of similarities between persecutory delusions and conspiracy theories. I mean, like many of the conspiracy theories have persecutory themes, and then also the grandiose themes as well. So thematically, they're very similar, and then there are some psychological commonalities between them, according to some studies. So I'm trying to see the possible connections between them. So my tentative idea is that both can be understood as the group belief, in the sense I talked about in my talk today. So both cases can be understood as somehow groups have some beliefs. In the case of Folie Deux, the groups have, for example, persecutory delusion. In the conspiracy theory, now you're looking at the big groups, actually huge groups. But you can think of the groups as the huge doxastic agents, and we can attribute some beliefs to it, to them. And in doing that, that kind of perspective enables us to look at some interesting features and similarities between them. For example, you might think that, so this is something I skip in my talk. So if we look at groups as individual, as epistemic agents, we can, one thing this is the testimony part that I skipped in my talk. So my view is that as the group, we can say that, for example, the sisters, as a group, they have collective testimonial abnormality in the sense that they are not responsive in a normal way to the testimony coming from outside of the group, right? So now you're looking at the group as an agent, as somebody receiving testimony from outside, right? And then similarly, we can apply the same idea to conspiracy theories cases. We can look at those conspiracy theorists as epistemic agent, and we can say that actually they are not responding to the testimony coming from outside in a reasonable way or something. I mean, the people in the group, they communicate with each other nicely. They learn from each other. They communicate. But if you look at them as a group, then we can say that actually the group is not responding to testimony coming from outside. So that's the kind of similarity. That's at least one similarity that I'm looking at in those two cases. So that's a wonderful question. That's something I'm working on now.
Right, thanks. The next question is from Sarah Arnaud.
Yes, thank you for your talk. I have maybe it's more a clarificatory question or something that I would like to hear more about. I kind of am resisting the idea or the understanding of a non-summative belief that is still a group belief. So if one of the people in the group or several do not have the belief, what's left, like, and to say that it's still a group belief and that is not, I don't know, a consensus or agreement, like you gave that example of the hiring committee. It seems that you could say, okay, that it's not a shared belief, it's not a group belief, it's just that some like people decided it's going to be like that and others agreed that it would be the case because of you know, the majority, or like and I'm wondering if it could be the explanation could lie in like behaviors. So in the beginning of your talk, you have this quote that is a definition of Folie Deux from 1942. And it's like, there is this aspect of it that it can be defined, if I understood well, by abnormal behavior. So is that sufficient? Like, if the sisters are just not believing anything that the first one is believing, but they're following her because of, I don't know, pressure, or because they like their sister, or then there is a behavior that corresponds to the belief of the sister. But is that sufficient to talk about a group belief then, even if they don't believe that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And then I think just, you know, before answering the question, I think I need to admit that I don't think I have a fully convincing answer to the question. But there are, but
yeah, I'm just curious about that, like if there is more, but yeah,
right. So one thing is that one thing that I noticed about those cases is that although secondary individuals, the sister 2 and the sister 3, do not seem to fully agree with the content, they do not seem to have full doxastic commitment, but nonetheless, they significantly contribute to the process where this idea is somehow shared and adopted as something they kind of representing their commitment, right? So it's not just that, you know, well, yeah, sister 2 and sister 3, well, I don't agree, but like the sister. I don't want to offend her. So just, I just follow what she says. It's not like that, actually. So they seem to do something more than that. Some kind of commitment, not doxastic, but some kind of a commitment, some kind of involvement in this kind of process where this idea gets accepted and shared as something representing their commitment. So I think that's the crucial part that I'm interested in, and then I agree with you that the Flickr kind of case is slightly different from my case, because the Flickr kind of case has this official procedure. So that's the institution official procedure, where how you kind of aggregate the votes, the views, there are some rules. So whatever you personally believe, you actually accept some rules of making decisions, where even though you don't personally believe, as the committee, they can come to a particular conclusion. So because of those rules, those cases, the kind of cases of Flickr and Gilbert talk about, those cases are very strong and good examples on non-summative cases. So non-summative cases, right? So even if you don't need to have personal beliefs to be part of the joint decision-making process, where you can come to a particular conclusion. Now, my kind of case is slightly different, because the group delusion cases, the Folie et Deux cases, because they are not like those artificial groups. So they're not committee members. They don't have any rules like that enable you to come to a conclusion as a group without individual commitments. So I really agree with you on that point. I'm still thinking about that part as well, that this analogy. So I think I agree with you that the Gilbert Flickr kind of cases where you have some particular rules for group decision making, they are very good and strong examples of non-summative beliefs. So my kind of cases are not as strong as those cases. I admit that, but still, I am interested in this idea that the cases of Folie et Deux can count as group beliefs as well, for the reasons I gave you in the beginning of my response. So it's not just that, sister two, sister three, okay, whatever you say, I'll just follow you. It's not that. They seem to have some kind of commitment, not full doxastic commitment, but they seem to be, they seem to be involved in the decision making process as well. So that's the thought.
Thanks. I think if I can, your example is probably a stronger case in the sense that there is more to just an agreement in the sense of like accepting the hiring because they don't have the choice, though still believing the opposite. Like it seems that there is something more there. Like why would they act like this? And maybe the behavior, the action also brings some doxastic doubt or something. I don't know, but maybe that would be like, if we say that it's still a group belief in your cases, that could be associated with a definition of belief that is very broad, or like there are these like eliminativist views of beliefs, like that the concept of belief is actually not really a thing. It's just the result of a lot of other things. And you talked about representations, for example, or and it could be it could be associated with that, but like it would be interesting to know what's the ingredient there that makes it still something that is more than just following the sister because they don't have the choice or they're forced to. And that's what I find interesting.
Yeah, great, thanks. I think that's absolutely right. So this is something I didn't talk about again. What was on my handout, but one interesting debate. So it's between. So for example, Jennifer Radden in her wonderful book on Delusion, she has one chapter on Folie, Deux. And then, so she talks about this debate whether secondary individuals are really delusional or not. So there's actually a debate because you might think that, well, the secondary people are just, just normal people. And there's nothing delusional about it. They're just normal people who learn some ideas from what they take to be trustworthy sources. That's what everybody does. And normal people do it. And then, so now, so the debate is whether, actually Radden does not agree with that. So they agree with the idea that the secondary individuals are not delusional at all. She thinks that they are delusional. Now, I think that one of the things that I want to do in this talk is I think that Radden and others are involved in a problematic dichotomy whether the secondary individuals are delusional or not. So that's a dichotomy, right? So they're delusional, or maybe they're not delusional. So that's the dichotomy. So what I want to try to part of the thing that I'm trying to do in this talk is that actually that's a false dichotomy, because if you think that so individually they are not delusional, secondary individuals are not delusional, maybe they don't believe the content, but you can still say that the secondary individual, so although they are not individually delusional, but they are part of the process in which they contribute to the group level delusion, right? So actually, individually they are delusional, but collectively they are delusional. So that's one thing we can say. Yeah, that's part of what I'm trying to say, and then that's one reason why I'm interested in non-summative view, because that enables you to say that although secondary individuals are not individually delusional, but they are kind of collectively delusional in the sense that they significantly contribute to the group level delusion. That's the
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question written down in the chat, so I'm gonna read it, but you can also have a look at the chat. So from Sarah Mengel, wondering about possible age-related sensitivities, for example, in families with young children, let's say under 12, is there any difference of strength of the group hallucinations in the case where children would be secondary carriers of the hallucination delusion and the parent will be the primary?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good point. I'm not a clinician. I'm not an expert, but I can share the thing that I learned so far. So the traditional understanding of Folie Deux is that the primary individual is kind of strong, older, for example, mother. And then the primary individual is influential basically, and a secondary individual is significantly younger. So, for example, son, and then easily influenced by what primary individuals are saying. So that's a kind of traditional understanding of Folie Deux. But if you look at actual cases, and if you look at some statistical studies and statistical analyses, there are a significant number of cases where primary individuals are actually younger than the secondary individuals. The case I gave you, the sisters, that's one of those cases. The primary individual was 21 at the time of incident, and then sister 2, sister 3 are 23 and 22. So they are older sisters. So the younger sister, the sister 1, she was the primary, and but she can influence the secondary individuals. So so it's actually controversial. The traditional understanding is actually controversial. But yes, yeah. So that's a controversial issue. But I agree with you. I mean, so the traditional understanding applies to many cases. So there are many cases, like a mother-son, mother-daughter, the father-son, father-daughter. There are many cases like that, but not always. So that's what I know so far. Yep.
Right. Is there any other questions? I might have one myself. So I think it's a question more about the implication of what you're saying rather than like the specific structure and purpose of the paper. I was wondering, because I'm really sympathetic to the view or the approach to import the tools of social epistemology to understand particular experiences. And I was wondering if talking about group delusions instead of individual delusions would also allow us to import tools from social psychology, such as groupthink and the phenomena that we observe when there's groupthink, such as polarization or a power relation in a group, and how people in power position will influence more other people. And so I think maybe it's a follow-up also on the past question about, like, in family, usually, as you say, the influence is coming from an authority position, the parents. And then, so yeah, so I was just wondering, like, do you think there's potential to use those tools as well to understand group delusions?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I think that's also related to the earlier question about conspiracy theory. And then I think that's one of the things. So actually, I started this project when I looked at the similarities and differences between delusions and something like conspiracy theories or group polarization. Okay, so the striking difference between them was that delusions are typically understood as idiosyncratic and personalized. Typically, only you believe it. Anybody else don't believe it. Right? So that's a typical case of delusion. And typical cases of conspiracy theories or group polarization, or maybe vaccination skepticism, those ideas are shared by many people in the community, in the physical community or communities in the internet. So you might think that, well, that's the definite difference between those two, right? So delusions, individualistic, personalized, only you believe it. Conspiracy theory, like shared by many people, you just learn the idea from others. Delusions are not like that. It's not the case that you learn delusion from somebody else. You come up with the idea. You develop the idea, right? Now, so that's the initial starting point. But then I got interested in Folie 2 as an interesting case, kind of connecting those two extremes. Like really highly individualistic delusions, only you believe it. And then the other extremes where some problematic beliefs are shared in the community by testimony, and a kind of middle ground. I locate the kind of Folie Deux as a kind of middle ground between those two extremes. And then I think it's kind of useful to, I thought that maybe we can think of, those two extreme cases, individualistic delusions and then particularly, the social conspiracy theories as the things located in the two extremes of the same spectrum, and then kind of thinking about Folie Deux in the middle enable us to think of those cases in a way in the same spectrum. So they are different. So the delusions and the conspiracy theories are really different, but actually they are on the same spectrum where, and then we can think of Folie Deux as something in the kind of middle, and then the kind of ideas and then the factors involved in thinking about conspiracy theories and then some kind of social stuff. So you can't really make sense of conspiracy theories and then other social problematic beliefs without thinking about social factors like testimony, like social media, and internet, and fake news maybe, right? So, but then those group factors and social factors are definitely relevant to conspiracy theories, and then maybe we can say something similar, or at least relevant when it comes to delusions as well. So that's the thought. So then now we can think of like these things as some, including both extremes, as somehow social in a broad sense of the term. So that's the project. So I agree. So coming back to your question, so that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So try to think of possibly social factors involved in delusion formation, development of delusions, not individual delusions, and a Folie Deux as well. Because I think that those factors have been largely neglected or at least downplayed in the traditional theories of delusion, where their focus has been on abnormal experience and an abnormal reasoning, those kind of individualistic factors. Yeah, so that's the project. Yeah.
Great, very interesting. I think we're running out of time for today's session. So again, I would like to thank our speaker of today, Kengo Miyazono. Thank you so much for being